On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Pranab Krishnan. He is a co-founder and CTO at Zeal. We're going to be talking about the relationship to customers and products. And I think we're going to be talking a lot about product engineering. We're going to be talking about the gap between engineering and the customer, really, and how, if as we shrink that and the feedback loops get better, we actually might result in better products. We're also going to talk about shifting software engineering left and going to dive into product engineering. Going to see how much we can get done with Pranab, but I appreciate your time. Thanks for joining.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Amir.
Absolutely. Before we start, why don't you tell everyone what Zeal does?
Absolutely. So I'm the CTO at Zeal. We are a payroll and payments platform for staffing companies. So we provide onboarding, payments, and billing products to these staffing companies in a full stack platform.
All right. Okay. So, I think this is a great topic because as we were kind of talking about before, especially in early stage startups or startups in general, the gap from engineering to customers typically is a lot less than more mature companies, and you see different rates of development as well. I guess let's talk about that. Being a co-founder, being a CTO, I guess inevitably, do you have to be a strong PM, a strong product manager as a part of your day to day?
I think the short answer is yes. What has been interesting, I think, in the journey of CTOs, and I think a lot of your audience can empathize with this, I like to say that the journey of a CTO is probably the most drastic over time because you start off coding an apartment or a basement or whatever have you, and then all of a sudden you are a salesperson, then you become a PM, and then you hire a PM, and then you become a designer, and then after that you start hiring PMs and designers, and you become a manager for this like EPD org sort of. And so I think you're forced to learn how to become a good PM. I think some of the best founders are really good PMs. But I think there's this interesting thing that, I'm sure we're going to talk about a lot more here, which is I think that everyone is a good product person, has to be a good product person at an organization. I think, I'm the CTO. We have a CEO, Kirthi, my co-founder, who is also an amazing product person and thinks on a product basis. And I think we have done a good job over time of keeping that culture of like everyone is a product person, not just the product manager, not just the product designer, not just the CTO. So for me personally, I think that maybe I'm not the one writing every single PRD, but there are definitely many times when when I'm tasked with alignment across different organizations, which at the end of the day is a lot of what a PM does. In the early days, we focused on talking to a lot of customers. At least for me, as a CTO, I fell into that trap of building things too early, as everyone does. But once you've made that mistake multiple times, you start to realize, oh, I do need to have a product muscle. I think that's kind of how things shifted for me early.
Interesting. I like how you refer to it as a product muscle. And I guess to kind of dive into that from a technical standpoint, right? Obviously, you mentioned early days, you're wearing multiple hats, you're doing a lot of code. Is that product muscle something that can just be learned? Is it something that you're just maybe just you lean into because you're better at it or you have more aptitude, or is it really something that the more involved you are in product management, the better you get with it?
Yeah, I think I was always a builder. I always loved like building things and showing it to people. So in many ways, I get to do that every single day here at Zeal, and that's why I love this job so much and I love this company so much. I think that everyone is different. I think I've met some PMs who come from a little more of an operations background into product. They're very set by maybe by like the rules, and they understand the space really well. And I've also met some technical PMs who come from engineering background, and then they realize, oh, like kind of like me, and I had to realize, oh, there's more to life than just coding, and there's more to success than just coding. In the early days, for example, for me, there were times when I thought coding was the most high leverage action to do, when in fact having those conversations with my co-founder about something that she talked about with a potential sale was like that debate or that argument was actually more productive than me writing another 100 lines of code. So I think everyone kind of comes at it from different ways. Now we're at a point where people are starting to realize that being a product thinker is even more important than before. I think I don't want to use the A word too early, but with AI coming up, and not only the prevalence of AI, but also the quality of AI agents improving over time, I think we're going to start seeing people starting to take on, like, starting to practice that product muscle more. And because my co-founder and I have set up that environment at
Mhm.
Zeal to focus on making everyone a PM, that has set everyone up for success in this type of era now. We see that managers at our team are thinking like PMs. The engineers are thinking like PMs when we put them in front of customers and we allow them to take an initiative end to end. So it's really cool to see, going back to your earlier question, like it's cool to see an engineer on our team who traditionally might have been in a little bit more of a siloed space working on something deep in payments, which is pretty gnarly, pretty technical, and pretty like heads down, to then being able to show up, like being able to build something for the customer, get on a call with our customer, with other people on it, and be able to answer questions directly. And they end up enjoying it a lot.
I actually let's talk about Gen AI, and you referred to some of what we're seeing out there, right? Still early days, and we're seeing a lot of discussion around what will happen to the skill of software engineering. I actually think it's interesting because I think if you were to poll a lot of software engineers, they would say they go to Stack Overflow, they go to Google, they go to look for little snippets of code all the time. They would dip into those repositories. So, having a tool that produces more of that code, it almost seems like an extension. It almost seems like we're actually going, you know what? Instead of you having to try to figure out some of those other pieces, well, here you go. Here's more of it. It actually might make you more efficient. And I guess we'll get into the shift left. But do you think we're just seeing evolution of software engineering, or are we seeing a paradigm shift away from the actual core skill?
Yeah. My thesis on this is that everything is an abstraction, in the same way that that TypeScript is abstraction. We are going to see AI becoming extraction and abstraction. The skills that I think people will need over the next 5 to 10 years is, and I think we're seeing this probably even with new grads now entering the workforce. I think it's going to be one, orchestration. So architecture, orchestration, and I think agency. So when I talk about things like orchestration, what that means is you're going to have AI agents, we're going to have AI tools that all serve different purposes. And in the same way that we now put jobs on a job queue that do a task, we're going to do the same thing with AI, and it's going to be another tool in our back pocket. When I speak about agency, what I mean by that is, actually, this reminds me of a tweet I saw the other day by Gary Tan, I believe, where he said, intelligence is on tap, but something about like agency is the core of capitalism. So agency is going to be even more important as intelligence is more easily available to us. And I think that for any engineering leader out there, you want to be promoting that on your team, and that's going to be the future. That's why I love YC. They cut through the noise. They're no BS. They say hire good people that you would be okay with them being founders one day, for example, right? And that should be maybe the culture you have in the first 5 or 10 employees. That is going to extend to your first 100 employees. And be like, everyone has to have the founder-like mentality. Everyone has to have agency. Everyone is going to be shifted left so that your PMs are going to be on sales calls and talking to customers. Your engineers are going to be product strategists, not just software engineers. Yeah, to answer your question more directly, I have a whole thesis on that. I think for any engineering leader out there, we have to prepare ourselves for that world. It also means we have to manage our teams a little bit different. If you want every single team member to be a product person, you have to run your teams like a product team. And I think we're going to see that too. For us at Zeal, we have built a culture where even our tax managers and our payment managers are product people. They have contributed to PRDs. They have a direct line to engineers. They create tickets. We've even done something. I remember one time during all hands, we would open up our product to everyone and give them credentials to an account and be like, all right, you guys are now the user, give us feedback. And at first it felt like a lot at one time. Everyone's like putting in Slack channel all their feedback, good and bad. And for the engineer, it's tough to hear. But in a way, that's kind of what a product person feels like all the time. When you are a PM, you talk to the customer and there's good, then there's bad, there's the ugly. And a PM needs to hear all of those things. But this time we're flattening that out. We are allowing our entire team to hear that feedback very open. So I think that's kind of what the next couple of years are going to look like, and I'm excited to see how teams are going to be running.
Absolutely. I guess it's interesting. I think if we were to go to any software company and we were to look at roadmaps and we were to look at product backlogs, I don't think there'd be a shortage of stuff, right? And most of it is limited by capacity of what engineering could produce. I actually kind of sometimes sit here and go, well, if engineers could produce more, we would be able to get more features out the door, focus on longer term roadmap stuff, and let maybe engineers innovate and focus on that product muscle that they just don't have time to do. And they do hackathons. And this is a conversation that's come up quite a number of times, is when I hear the hackathon, I'm like, this is the canary in the coal mine. When you give an engineer 2 days of nothing but just the freedom to go create and solve a problem on their own without any constraints, they come up with good stuff. So imagine if we just gave them more time, what would happen? Well, they probably would, they're problem solvers. They probably would find good problems to solve. So, as we're looking at this and we're thinking of this notion of shifting engineering left, which you and I are talking about, I still don't think I've convinced people to catch on to this
I like the
phrase,
term.
but
I love it.
I like it because where else are they going to go? They're going to go into the business that's left. So, as they're shifting left into the business, engineers are natural problem solvers. Talk to us about the backlog. What do you think is going to happen to the backlog and their time from, hey, I don't have to write code anymore?
Yeah. I think that actually, so I could see it happening in two ways, and I think it depends on the culture of the team. So option A is we're talking about engineers becoming more product focused. So you're going to see a lot more rote tasks being completed by AI. I think, at this point you can just like tab through autocompletes. You can we can build a lot much more quickly. Now, that being said, I think one thing that we should also talk about is this idea of, in the early days, they talk about, like, a startup, they say, how do you know when to move so fast and break things versus when to slow down and actually do things properly? Like for us, we are in fintech, so we can't just duct tape things together and be like, here you go. Like we have to really be intentional about what we build. So I think my thesis on that is, all right, well, we can't move fast and break things, but at least we should focus on the core items being extremely robust, right? So payroll has to be extremely accurate. And that's been a challenge for us in the beginning because we're like such a small company. And then we built that. I'm very proud of what we've built. And I think it's extremely impressive. But the core payments infrastructure, payroll itself, those things have to be really down pat. But we can move fast on the edges. So I actually think that, at least in fintech, engineers will be tasked with system architecture and understanding the core engine of how like real business value is provided. But then from like a UI perspective and from as you said, like problem solving to the customer and how they interface with products, that is going to be much faster. I think that is going to change a lot. We're seeing this right now. We're using this tool. I'll give them a quick shout out because I love them. They're called Magic Patterns. But they are one of the tools that allow you to build designs extremely quickly using AI. So you can say, hey, like here's some inspiration. This is what our page looks like right now. Design something. And with just one prompt, I could change the way this design looks, or I can give more inspiration and it changes. So I'm really excited for new modalities and new ways that people are going to be interacting on the front end. But especially in fintech, I don't know if AI is going to change the way our engineers build core payment systems. because of how important it is. And I don't think our customers would want that either. The same reason why they would not want to use AI to like run their payroll. They want something deterministic and something reliable. In other industries, like for example, for consumer, a lot, barring consumer fintech, I think a lot of companies are trying to innovate in the way people use the product and that type of channel. So there, I'm very excited to see what that looks like.
Fantastic, by the way. And I actually would like to talk about that. You mentioned magic patterns, interesting tool. From your perspective, obviously teams have designers, teams have UI, UX individuals, we have other engineers on the team. You found a tool that's apparently pretty efficient, right? I mean, you obviously can prompt it. Would that mean, and again, doesn't mean we're committing you to the answer now because obviously you guys are a growing startup, but as you can foresee growing bigger, is it going to mean you really don't need to hire somebody on design, or is it the person in design, because obviously they have a design eye, they'll just be faster, or you'll just need a consultant, they'll just be faster? I guess, how has that helped you now, and is it going to eliminate the need for a design person on your team?
Yeah. Well, I love the term that you have, shift left. I think that's going to happen to designers too. I think we're going to start seeing that designers will need to be on customer calls directly. Like they're not an IC anymore, right? They are actually going to be helping the product team with broader team alignment. They're going to be helping, and our designer does that right now. I tell them that all the time. I'm like, a big part of your job is not just to be pushing pixels in Figma, but to also be, to be driving forth large initiatives for this new, like for our worker app and the mobile app that we have. So we're going to see that even designers, similar to engineers, will have to focus on orchestration and agency. And they will, I think some of the best designers, actually, I think we're seeing this kind of already. I think a lot of designers will become founders one day too. I think a lot of strong founders have a good design eye, and a lot of them are prioritizing it a lot more these days. But yeah, I think I don't think it'll eliminate the need for a designer. You still need someone who is going to be holding down the fort and providing that kind of backbone. I made a joke with our product team the other day where like I've been starting to use ChatGPT for like all types of things in my personal life as well, and even for like cooking. And I'm like, hey, here's my weekly recipe. I told them like my biggest feedback for ChatGPT is that it does not have a backbone. Right? Like I can say something one week and then it'll think, oh, Pranab likes that. I'm like, no, I changed my mind. 2 weeks later, I changed my mind. So I hope that experience is a little bit better in AI over the next couple of years, but you still need, I think, that human in the loop and someone to orchestrate these tools.
I love that. By the way, my wife started using ChatGPT to figure out recipes. She'll go into the fridge and be like, we have these 6 items, kick out a recipe our child will like, and it does a pretty good job. Like we don't Google recipe. By the way, there's an app idea for somebody out there. I mean, you and I just talked about it, but somebody can make probably a several $100 million company around just recipes from an AI and add some computer vision. Boom. By the way, I want some credit. You and I need some credit for that.
Yeah. Well,
there you go. But look, I just want to touch on something you mentioned. We are talking about shifting left, and actually, I think you made an interesting observation about UI and designers shifting further left. I actually think maybe we're going to see them shift right, because if we're going to abstract programming and development, they already know how to design. They have the eye. What they don't have is the technical skills to bring that product to fruition. You go on to a lot of these dribbles and you see tons of UIs built for fictitious products. All of a sudden, fuel these people to go, hey, bring that product to life with minimal cost because you don't need 19 developers, nor do you understand architecture. And boom, all of a sudden, I think Sam Altman said you'll have the one-person billion-dollar company. There we go. So I think, I think this is interesting because I think everyone's going to have a chance to shift left into the business to become more hands-on to the business. And I think people will gain faux technical skills to shift right and actually deliver. And how many people have you met across your career? I mean, you're a CTO, you could code. Man, if I knew how to code, I would bring this app to, I have this killer app. It would make me a billionaire, but darn, I just don't know how to actually, do the work. I mean, we've heard that 100,000 times. So I think it's going to be really interesting.
I like that point. Yes, I think being technical. I think it's more than being technical in the world of AI. I think it is being in the top 5% of the AI. First of all, being an AI native. I love that word of being AI native as a
Hmm.
person. And then also secondly is being in the top 5% of being an AI user. So I think that's like, I saw a tweet by one of the partners at Menlo, I believe. He was able to use Claude 3. The Sonnet 3.7 to simulate like cloth, like the physics of cloth, which is a pretty hard problem to begin with, because if you have physics, you have the shear, you have you have gravity, you have the reflections of the light, and this particular story is really interesting because he had posted something about it, and the and Richard Feynman's son had actually written a paper about cloth simulations and computations back in like 1980s, and he commented on this guy's post saying, "I wrote this paper back in 1980s. AI was able to do it in just 1 minute." So I think like something as interesting as like a UI, something as intricate as a UI for cloth simulation, can now be done really easily. So I love your point about designers might have some really interesting ideas, even more interesting ideas than we have about what should exist in the world. That maybe that they should learn how to use AI tools and be more specific. What do you think would be like the first step for a designer who has never coded before?
Somebody once said to me, you can judge expertise by the types of questions people ask. And I think these tools that we're going to start seeing, I think it's going to be a question of how complete they are. Because I think right now, as they are, and maybe in the next several years, it requires a technical person to ask those questions because you're not going to know the nuance of if the answer is correct or not. And I think, as you kind of alluded to, it won't know if you decide to change something to kind of not consider it. And you're going to have to remember to tell it to, hey, don't consider previous. So I think we're going to see an interesting, I think the path will be interesting because I do think engineers are going to shift left more easily and be able to prompt these tools to help them with efficiency and get through more of these backlogs and be more involved with customers. Some things that maybe engineers didn't get into engineering for. That's actually maybe my concern. I think the designers who are going to be able to shift right, I think they do need the tools to get more mature. And I think once they do in a couple of cycles, and God knows, maybe 5 years from who knows what the timeline is, but I think as they do, I think the power does shift because I think you can have the best code, but if your design's not good, it's going to be really hard to get people to convince them to use it. And I think design is something that you do need some natural gift for. It's learnable. I think I don't want to, people, engineers out there to message me saying, you don't think we can do this. I certainly think they can do this. I think anyone can learn anything, but I do think there's natural, aptitude in designers that they just have that eye. And again, you could say maybe it's a muscle we exercise. But I guess from your perspective, when you're looking at your organization, you're already looking at these tools. You're already thinking, how can I use these tools? Are you envisioning, and maybe this will be a last question for you because I know you got to get back to it, but are you envisioning that in the next couple of years, you just won't need to hire as many engineers? Is that a world that you actually see coming true as people are shifting further left, these tools are maturing?
I think we're going to see a time when we're a pretty flat organization. We're a pretty lean organization. I think we're going to see a time when people don't need to hire as much in the short term. But I do think that the expectations for what your product does and the service area of your product is going to increase. So before you would say, like a VC would look at you and be like, all right, for this SaaS app, I would expect it to take 2 years to build with this amount of team. But now the expectation is going to be a little bit different. Now it's going to be like, okay, we expect you to have a full platform product with 5 different sub products within 2 years with that same amount of team. So to answer the question, I do think so. I think the in the short term, people will want less engineers, but then over time, the expectation will just grow, and we'll go back to the state that we were at before, which is people still want more engineers, but the rate of how much software we have in the world is just going to increase even more. There's going to be more opportunity. It's not zero sum, in my opinion.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I spoke to somebody that does e-commerce generative AI, and they said they can envision a future where anytime you go to a website, it's going to be new. It's going to be custom to you. Like there won't be a second website that looks like it. Every website will be tailored to you because it'll know coming in something about you, and it'll be rewritten on the fly to be. I mean, I guess we're just at the start of that, so people are going to start using their imaginations. But
Yeah, I
Pranab,
think
man,
the key
oh, sorry,
there.
go.
Yeah, one note I'll make there is I think the key. Something about this. Like the key is the platform, the foundational model layer, or the company, the big AI company that's going to do this well is most likely going to be the one who has the most data about you. So OpenAI is already poised. It already has an amazing consumer app. It's already poised to know a lot about you. I would not be surprised if OpenAI builds its own Netflix, its own Webflow, its own e-commerce. Like they could verticalize in any different way because they would be the central layer that knows everything about you. So let's see what happens. I'm excited to see for the next 5 years or so how it all
Awesome,
progresses.
man. Well, I'm really excited about, you're dipping into some tools. You're trying some of these tools out. You got a product mindset that you want the team to have. I mean, maybe we'll have you back on in a little bit to kind of see how all this has progressed. I mean, I really appreciate your time. If we spurred a discussion, somebody might have a follow up for you. What's a good way of connecting with you in general?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm easiest to find on LinkedIn. I've been blessed with a unique enough name where I'm pretty easy to find. So it's just Pranab Krishnan. And in fact, if you Google Pranab SF, I think I'm in the top 5 at least. So pretty easy to find, hopefully.
There you go. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing. I really do appreciate your time.
Thanks, Amir. Great seeing you.
Absolutely. All right. That's it for this episode. We'll be back again, different guests, different topic. Until then, two things. One, we were talking about relationship with customers and product. We obviously pulled in some Gen AI and what's going to happen with the scale of engineering. We talked about it, where it could go. We talked about designers and where they could actually start leveraging some of these tools. And Pranav really highlighted how product is a muscle. And actually, he's actually having his team kind of focus on being more product minded. They're bringing in some tools to help with some Gen AI lifting of even design stuff. I think he mentioned product. We can link to it. So I think the conversation was great. I know we'll have some future prediction stuff in there too, so don't hold that to us. But share this episode with somebody else who might find it interesting. I would really appreciate that. Also, like, subscribe, comment, leave me a review for the show. Let me know how it's going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.